everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to another episode of Criminal Justice Cafe. Today we have on a wonderful guest to talk about some great things. Welcome Holli Coulman, who is a prison consultant for Wall Street Prison Consultants and also Pink Lady Consultants. She works diligently and is justice impacted, just like myself. And for any of you who have not followed any of my podcasts, I've spent 7 months in Danbury Federal Prison for overstating my income on my mortgage. So I'll let Holli tell a little bit about her story in a bit. But today's episode, we're going to be talking about the women that are inside prison and how they feel about the world continuing without them on the outside. So welcome, Holli. It's so great for you to be here.
Thanks for having me, Jacqueline. As usual, I love it.
I know our schedules they've been really tight to coincide. So it's wonderful that we were able to get this time. So if you could tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, it'd be great.
Sure. Currently, as Jacqueline said, I am a prison consultant. I went through this whole experience and it obviously opened my eyes, and I felt that there's such a need in this particular space because, again, you're not prepared for anything like this, and your attorneys can only handle so much, and there's the whole gamut with family, emotions, life, and what it's going to mean for you for the rest of your life. So it's something that I got involved in. I was sentenced to a 21-month sentence for 1 count of wire fraud. I worked for a high-tech firm, and it was a horrible thing where eventually I had to go ahead and just take the plea deal. So 21-month sentence, I did 13 months in Victorville, Federal Women's Prison Camp in Adelanto, California. I did 2 months in solitary confinement in the special housing unit because I was blogging, meaning I was sending emails out, which were then put on my personal blog about the women's safety at the camp at the time. And they didn't like that too well, so put me in solitary for 60 days for punishment. And then I did 3.5 months at a halfway house, even though I had a home to go to and met the criteria. They just kept me there. So been through all of that. During that time, I also got my paralegal. And now when I'm not doing prison consulting, I'm doing my main job, which is working at the Dallas County Public Defender's Office.
That is wonderful. Let me ask you something. I heard you said you had to plead guilty because we all know, right?
You're faced with a decision whether, remember at the time it's going to be the preponderance of evidence, not beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I think the public needs to understand the difference between that. If there's one teeny little thing that's completely black in ink and it could be related to you, you're going to be convicted. And your plea deal, which is usually substantially lower than what the normal sentence may be, you're faced with, okay, well, if I take it to trial, and not only that, but the monetary expense of having to pay the additional funds to go to trial, which it just is ridiculous. So yeah, you're put kind of in a box.
Yeah, same as me. I mean, for me,
you had to take.
Yeah, I was facing, if I went to trial, I would have been facing a much, much longer sentence. I mean, the government wins 99% of their cases for financial crime. So, which is why they get so many plea deals. I'd like to talk about, I know when I was inside Danbury, we get to email our family and loved ones. I had 3 children, but they were going through college at the time. They needed their mom, and I was inside, and I'd love for the community to learn about how, when you are inside prison, there's a saying, you cannot live with 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And what that means is you cannot control anything that goes on in the outside world. And the debilitating effects it has on your mental health is horrible. How did you feel when you were inside and you were in a camp? So you're in a camp and there's not many restrictions in the camp, and you're in this camp, and you know on a daily basis that your loved ones are going about their day-to-day business, moving along while you're stuck.
It was no matter what, it is just, it's gut wrenching, and it still stays with me. Now, I do not have children, but it's still the impact of having family and their lives going on. My husband, we're very close to in-laws, very close to my mother. There's health issues going on with family members. You're just not completely connected other than with the email, and there's nothing you can do. And you almost feel like you're gone, you're dead. Because you have, again, that no control. You don't have that constant contact, and you cannot physically help somebody. You can send words on paper, you can talk on the phone very briefly, but that's not enough for communication and keeping that. You really have to sit there and you have to develop kind of a plan. This is what I did, and with the women that I was with, because you see this, the horrible things that you'll have your bunkie or another woman will have a death in the family and how it affects them. They can't be out there to do anything. And you have to develop something where you're going to have to learn how to be okay with letting them take the control and letting them live. They're already been scared for you. They've already been very, it's an emotional process for the entire family unit, period.
It is. I remember when I was in Danbury, I got an email. Now, mind you, as Holly knows, when you email somebody from any facility, it takes about 2 to 3 hours for the other person to receive your email, vice versa. So if their email, because emails have to be read, I went to email and I read an email from my son, who was 18 at the time, and it said, call home immediately. Nanny, which is my mom, they call her Nanny. Nanny's been run over by a car. So I freaked. I ran to the phones, and the women all cleared the phones for me. Mm-hmm. My mother had gotten into my mother, who is now 82, at the time she was 76, 75. She got into a very bad accident where her own car, the brake slipped on it, and it ran her over where the top literally took the top of her head off. And I couldn't get through to the hospital. I couldn't do anything. And I'm her only daughter, and I'm the one who's my parents' caretaker for most of the part. And I was stuck in a facility, right, which was 10 minutes from the hospital where she was. And the feeling, the gut-wrenching feeling knowing that my mother could have died at any moment, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't be there, couldn't talk to her. And I really would love for the community to know it's not about being incarcerated, because we are paying our crime for our lives. I mean, we're lifetime felons. It is about the collateral damage to our families. We are in prison. There's nothing you can do about that. And the outside world that needs us no longer has access. They couldn't call me, as Holly knows. I don't know if you've experienced anything when you were in that you just needed to get in touch with the outside world.
Oh, many things, very similar stories. I had, again, a very good friend who lost her baby girl and didn't have the funds really to even, stay on the phone. And they did, of course, the prison didn't do anything additional. And it was just a very horrific thing. And having to comfort that person, and, it's just, these are things that the public needs to know. And I don't want to hear you do the crime, you do the time. This is not what it's about. It's already, devastated your entire family unit and friends. And so you have to figure out how you have to personally go on. They're living the life, but you have to figure out how to handle this inside. There was a great thing, Jacqueline, when my husband was in the military. They used to have the spouses pull together And they did these classes because when the men and women would deploy and be gone for several months, it's almost that same type of situation. They're not there, can't be reached, and you're managing everything day to day. And so I was on that side living my life while he was doing this. And now we had flipped. His was more honorable, of course, than what I was going through. But that class actually, it was to be able to understand and tell people that you feel like you're just gone, out of mind, out of sight, and nobody needs you.
Yeah.
And that's hard as one, as a human, and two, as a woman, because we're very nurturing, that we can't do the things that we want. So to be able to express that either in writing, and reaching out as much as possible and staying as communicative as you can, that's it. But again,
And
it
I have
is.
to say, and not to interrupt, I apologize, but what you said resonated with me. I also often hear, you do the crime, you do the time. However, I agree with that. I do. You do a crime, you absolutely should be punished. But I have to be honest, home confinement was harder than being in Danbury in different ways. The only benefit I had was I was able to have people call me in my family if they needed me. But there really is, it's so lateral that the time done in home confinement is so equivalent to the time done in a camp, a prison camp for women, in my opinion. The only difference is the collateral to your family is less damage. And the guilt I felt that my family was being punished for the darkest moment of my life was I overstated the income on the mortgage application, and my family was being terribly punished for that. And I'll be punished for that. Don't get me wrong, the rest of my life, I'm a felon. So,
but it's that guilt, right? Because it's okay. So I have that crime, me. It's attached to me, but really no, it's everybody. It's the entire family, and it's going to affect it in every way. And this is a piece that people, and I know these women feel so disconnected sometimes, and then that's why they, shut down and sleep a lot or crying and just can't get over it because they're not there, no longer necessarily able to help or need it.
Yeah. It's true. I recently
you lose part of yourself.
You do. That's exactly right. I'm back in school getting my doctorate in social work and my master's in criminal justice. And a professor asked me the other day what the question was, who are you? And my answer was quite interesting, because when you enter a federal prison of any type, you aren't anyone. You're stripped of your identity. You are a number. You no longer have an opinion. You no longer have a family. You no longer have shoes or clothes, or it's not even about your crime. If I was to die in prison, or if I was to have a stroke or get sick, my family members would not even be notified.
Correct.
And if another inmate notifies, right? And then it's true. And if another inmate notifies them, they get into trouble because I'm property of the department, the Bureau of Prisons.
People need to understand that property. You're not called by your name. You're called by an inmate number. Yeah, you're nothing.
Yeah.
You lose all of that self. It's why we always say, keep your dignity, but you do lose part of your self-worth. You do through this.
You do.
And that's the part you have to really work on. This lasts well beyond camp or your incarceration piece. So it's well beyond that.
It does. And I have so many women that I work with that are inside now, and they're going through divorces, and they can't be there at their divorce, and they lose everything because there's nobody advocating for them. They don't have their money anymore. And they're working for 17 cents an hour, 30 cents an hour, however they're making. And it's devastating that they can't even I have one woman who's been married for 34 years. Her husband's leaving her. He's filed a petition for everything, and they have a court date. And she could choose to go to that court date. If she does, she's in Danbury. If she does, they'll take her, bring her to Rhode Island to let her sit overnight in solitary confinement, to ship her back to Danbury to go to court, then go back to Rhode Island, to go back to the camp. And she's lost her bunk. She's lost everything that she had in Danbury. She now starts over.
And see, and this is, look at the trauma with this. I mean, we understand that's the process, but you have to weigh that. And she has to weigh that, whether she's going to want to appear in court or go through this. And can you do it? Can you get through this on top of a divorce?
Yeah, it's transition after transition.
It's just, these are life experiences that it's, again, it's something we need to shed a light on.
Yeah.
Like I said, we shouldn't really, like I said, I've always said there shouldn't even be prison camps. There should be a punitive aspect attached to it, but not this, because this is, again, you strip somebody of their complete identity, you become a property. How much damage is that now heaped on you as well? Because you're not prepared for that.
It's true. And I have conflicting, I mean, I'm in school for criminal justice. So you work for the judicial system. So I have conflicting thoughts about it, but if you weigh the transitional mental health piece to it, these women on the federal side, I'm not talking about state side, on the federal side, they're transitioning from their houses where many, for instance, my crime was in 2008. I got sentenced in 2014. I self-surrendered in 2015. I spent 3 years after I got out of prison on probation. It is now 2021, and if you Google me, everything, I'm a felon. And the sad thing is if you Google any one of my family members, I come up first. Their great accomplishments are still underneath my association with them. And the
it's the same for me.
Yeah.
It's the exact same for me.
And it seems no matter how good you do.
It is it's just a trauma, but the mental health aspect of this, it's a piece that should be addressed. We should have, and if you were going to keep these particular camps and FCIs, then we talk about programming, and it's almost non-existent inside for rehabilitation. But we need to have this addressed because it's just going to bleed over into every part of the rest of this transitional phase. I mean, from the incarceration to once you're home and rebuilding and going back out. But getting back to when you're sitting in your bunk and those walls, you feel like you're just completely gone. So you have to figure out how to pull that self-worth back in.
And it's hard. It is hard. I mean, I believe in restorative justice. I believe in punitive justice. I believe in, if you're a violent criminal or a second-time offender, you need to be inside. But most of these women, 99% of these women are first-time non-violent offenders that are going to a camp. They have a home. They are in a camp. They owe money. They can't work to pay back the money because they're in a facility. I also hear a lot, and I don't know if you hear a lot, well, the taxpayer dollars that pay for this. And I tell you, when I went
many times,
right?
Many times. So.
How much did you spend on a monthly basis to be?
Myself? Well, maximum was $360. My crime isn't it's a financial crime. So any type of money that I would ever have placed, that my family, remember, it's my family's money, putting on what we call books to use. Anything more, they would have taken more just because of that. But you have, women that don't make anything, and for them to have to transition from this type of setting and then go out and start over. Yeah, well, $42 to what? $46,000 to house an individual, and it definitely does not trickle down to the inmate
Yeah.
And it definitely does not aesthetically, this is not a camp, whatever, club fed.
No,
It is not.
no.
They are
I get
not.
frustrated when I hear that terminology,
I know, I do too.
club fed, because, okay,
No.
yes, there's a track, but that's for mental health. I mean, everybody deserves to be able to move their body, right? They're inside.
Correct. I mean, our track was in the desert where the officers drove their trucks around to make enough track to walk in the ground.
About this wide, right? Ours, the women dug it.
It's not a track. It's not a nice track, but it's someplace you can go walk. Yes.
And I always think of what could be a better way. So that's what I would like. Like I hear a lot of podcasts, people complaining, people saying this is the way it is, trying to educate the community as to what it is, but no one really comes up with a better way.
You are so right. That is what it always is. It's like, collectively, what is the answer to this?
Yeah.
Again, we were talking about the punitive aspect of it, but they're not, for $42,000, keep that in the taxpayer dollars, develop mental health programs. Exactly. To help with trauma. You know, a lot of women have alcohol and drug problems. We need to have those addressed. Those don't necessarily just disappear because they're off them for a period of time. They're still, you know, going back into an environment, education. Those are the things those are the answers to, and have the conversations to make these changes. And this is what the public really needs to say, okay, I'm hearing you, Jacqueline and Holly, let's take this money or less, and we can do it for less, and stop putting all these people in prisons.
Yeah. I can tell you, and you know, as a prison consultant, when you're working with women, most women who commit a white collar, and I hate that terminology, let's say financial crime, right? Most women who commit a first-time financial crime all have the same underlying issues. And I know I did. All of them are people pleasers. All of them are caregivers. All of them take care of their families. A lot of them are self-employed. A lot of them have pressure. They feel that they don't amount to anything. And the one thing I felt, which I recently found out through therapy, is I felt my worth was what I gave people. And
most with this particular types, yes, it is. Yes.
Now I
it's
can't
what you
imagine,
gave people,
right? Can you imagine if someone at that time said to me, "You need 1 year of intense therapy to work on yourself," instead of putting me through the transition after transition, hurting my family, hurting myself as well, hurting my family, hurting myself, hurting my parents, hurting everybody involved, hurting the victim because I couldn't pay the victim, which was the bank. But regardless, the bank was a victim.
It doesn't matter. There's a victim, right?
Yeah. And when I was home, quite frankly, I was paying my mortgage. It was when I went into prison is when I stopped because I no longer had the means. But if I was put in intense therapy at that point in time, it would not have taken me 4 years of seeking therapy when I came home to get to the point where I am now. And I think that
public, do you hear that, public? 4 years of her to get where 4.
And you too.
It's the same. It's the same, of course. I mean, I've had to have counseling, and it's the same situation. You know, people pleaser, the big 3. You know, wanting to do things for others, and finding your self-worth, and that's what you did. But here you go.
How many times, Holly, prior to your incarceration, did you say no to people?
Hardly any. I mean, that's why if you were to even look at performance evaluations or any type of, or ask anybody that I worked with, rarely a no. Yeah. Rarely a no.
Even the things that I knew, if I really did not want to do something, it was always yes, no problem. No problem was my thing. Oh, no problem. Yeah. Oh my God, you're short on funds. No problem. I got it. I was a fixer. That was my job in life, is what I thought. I thought my worth was fixing things. And
I love how the government thinks that this is the fix to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's their take. So
it's true. We had a big joke in Danbury with a lot of the women wow, can you imagine if we ran this camp? How different.
It's not a joke. We had what we called the board meetings, as in BORED, board meetings. But it was the same thing to say, can you imagine what we can accomplish?
Yeah.
Because of what we all bring to the table that we're there, it would be run in a profitable manner and not
really
where you're hurting somebody.
Yeah. And did you have the town halls? We had town halls in Danbury where the administrator would come up once a month and she would stand on this podium and all of the inmates, the women, and at the time I was in Danbury, there was 216 women. We would all crowd under, just waiting to hear something of value, something to hold on to. And there was nothing. It was nothing hopeful.
And they had every opportunity to do something. Addressing that situation, they could have made it a better environment. They could have. Yes, we had these, and that's why I rolled my eyes, because I still find town halls, absolutely, there are more of blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then you have to weed through. It's more like they're going to tell you, this is what we're going to do, but not tell you all of it. So you know it's not going to be that great, and it's not going to definitely not benefit you.
It's true. It's true. And the funny thing is I have a fix to this. So you tell me what you think. My thought process is someone commits a white collar crime. They need to be punished. They need to pay back they have a home to live in. So they are now put on home confinement. And home confinement is no joke. When I tell you it is no joke, I mean, you're filling out, you can't leave your house unless the halfway house who's monitoring for the Bureau of Prisons knows exactly where you are. And they call you all hours of the night. So at 2:00 in the morning, my family was woken up because they had to make sure I was sleeping in my home and not out running, I don't know where, but at 2 a.m. At 50 years old, I'm not quite sure where I would be at 2 a.m.
but anyway,
besides sleep. But my thought process is, put these women on home confinement, mandate 3 times a week therapy.
Mm-hmm.
The days they have therapy, community service, and they must have at least a part-time job, and a portion of that income goes to the victim. And
agree with you full-heartedly.
It's a fix. It is a fix.
They will see the recidivism, which I hate that word.
Yeah, I know.
It would go down completely. Yeah. But not only that, it would create opportunity. It would give a self-worth back to the person. And they could go back into paying whatever, monetary fines that they need to pay. Yes, like you said, home confinement is not easy. I tell a lot of my clients that just, inside is not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. Home confinement can actually tend to be a lot worse.
Yeah. And it's true. And you said you went to a halfway house too. So I remember someone inside saying to me, stay in Danbury, don't transition to halfway. And I thought, oh no, it's a halfway house. They're going to help me. I'm going to be halfway home. I left Danbury. I went to the halfway house, and it was jail. It was horrible. And the women that worked there, and I'm going to be honest here, and if they're listening, I apologize if I'm disrespecting you, but the women that work there are not qualified to oversee inmates of any capacity. They do not have the degrees. They don't have psychological degrees. They don't have social work degrees. They don't know how to deal with the transitional mental health problems that happen. And so they sit there and they say, okay, these are your chores. We're going to give you a list of chores to do in the halfway house, and this is what you have to do. And you have to leave at 8:00 in the morning and go look for a job. Mm-hmm. So now my answer was, I have a job. Oh, no, you still have to, until that job is approved, you need to go look for a job. Yeah. And the common sense to that was, okay, but I have a job making more money than you want me to and I'll gladly. And at the time I had to pay for my bed. Did you have to pay for your bed at the halfway house?
I did. Well, this is the situation with me. I had a job, but it was going to be remote. So the hope was for me to get home and do this job remote. No, not going to happen.
Yeah.
I need a supervisor. You need to be at a place that I can go visit, not that I can call on the phone to say, hey, is she doing her job? I said, okay, great. Well, I'm getting my paralegal education. They take into effect education. No, you're already educated enough. In fact, you're going to need to stop doing your paralegal studies while you're here. Yeah. I'm like, are you kidding me? But here's your statement. And it says this, this, and this. And then, okay, I'm going to get a job, but it's outside of the 20-mile radius. It's like 22 miles. Nope, too far.
Yeah.
Keep go. No matter if they're going to call you and check in and come and visit with you or not. We want you to work within this radius. And remember, most of halfway houses are not in these great locations. They're in poor communities. You're taking public transportation a lot of times until you can get your own transportation approved. There's lots of parameters on this.
Right.
And so again, you're put in a box.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we have a job. You can either go work at the chicken ranch,
right,
or there's the Waffle House, or is this. And you're beholden to that. And again, the people that are managing these halfway houses, it's poor communities that these are in. These are the only paying jobs, and they are not licensed.
Yeah.
They don't have the ability to help you with mental health counseling.
No, they don't.
Just to scale themselves.
and the common sense to it is beyond what I could imagine, because I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, I can go work here, but then they say to me, yes, and we can pop in at any time. So you need to tell your employer you're living in a halfway house. Well, the employer, that's putting now a collateral damage on the employer, who's taking on a lot. There's very few employers that want to take on that kind of responsibility, because if you're working with the public, say you're working in a Dunkin' Donuts or a McDonald's, now you have a probation officer walking in because they need to check on the person who's working there, and the public is seeing that. That's a stigma that, oh my God, they have a felon working here.
Right. And they have a felon working here. Mm-hmm.
That poses a whole other issue.
So, to correct all this, we come up with plans, and that's why I love talking with you, because in the community, the women that you're helping, the women that are coming in the system or even going out that are my clients / even friends, these are the voices, and this is what we want the public to understand and know, and to come in and help. We all have an obligation to our community. I believe that. I believe in my neighbors. I am a felon. I am a neighbor.
That's right.
So we need to come up with a solution to not just incarcerate people like this. And then all the trauma that we just went through, watching the world pass us by, and our families, and the grief and the remorse and the self, worth, the loss of that, and how all that can be avoided by is how we handle it to begin with.
Yeah, the communities, and I think what communities don't understand too is when you're inside and you are living in your own little world, because it isn't part of the world as we know it on the outside. It is its own community in the inside. And you're not advancing with technology as the world is on the outside. You're not advancing. You're no longer able. This is what amazes me, and I'm sure you have experienced this. You're no longer able to think for yourself. So you don't have an opinion when you're incarcerated. When you come home, I found myself going to a grocery store. I couldn't choose. I would sit there and I couldn't choose between cereals, because I was so used to having somebody tell me, you can't choose that. You don't have a choice. Mm-hmm. The only thing that can overcome it is
so shocking to yourself too, because you're going, well, for me, it was toothpaste. I'm like, oh my gosh. I have no idea which one. I can choose any one I want. But those are the things that you lose, that you find yourself going, wow. And then slowly gain that back.
Yeah.
But
even going to a restaurant, and there was a choice on the menu, and it wasn't hard-boiled eggs or tacos, I would say to my husband, can you just pick for me? Because I didn't have the ability. I didn't have the ability no longer to choose because my identity was gone. I didn't know who I was. I had to reinvent myself, which is it's a great podcast to listen to, the one prior to mine when we had Craig Stanlin on, who had to reinvent himself. I'm sure you found the same thing.
It's the same thing. What am I going to do and how am I going to do this? And like I said, I became a prison consultant not to say, hey, I can fix your problem. It was all the things that you're going to go through that I watched and witnessed with other women that I took away, that they even let me take their stories with me and start taking this criminal justice. We talk about reform, but trying to make a difference and trying to help these ladies so that way they don't get to where we were, where you lose the self-worth, you become, no identity, and to help their families and to stay in communication and let the woman know that they're going to run and control this stuff for a while, and you're going to need to let them do that. And there'll be days that you're just not going to hear from them, but don't think that they don't miss or love you.
Yeah.
And don't give up.
And what I have to ask you, I know that prison consultants get a bad rap.
They do.
That name, prison consultant, which I'm not quite sure what else you're supposed to call somebody who is consulting with somebody who is
guidance, advice. We've seen a bunch of different, but you have to be very careful, just like in any industry, of who you talk to and where you go. I feel that, for myself, again, I've been through this, and I certainly do not rip people up. I will never. It's mostly everything that I do is very nominal, and it's mostly to file anything that would ever be the money part of it.
Yeah.
But yes, with anything, you have to be careful who you go through. And I think if you talk and ask the questions, and especially like what we're talking about today, women-centric, there's not many of us women who do this.
No, there really isn't. I mean, I know you have a counterpart, Larry.
I do.
Levine is your counterpart for men. And my counterpart is Jeff Grant. So he works with the men. I work with the women. I personally, I don't charge anything at all right now. My thing is I really want to educate the communities. I am astounded at the things that I hear from others about listening when someone else is incarcerated. But what I went through with my neighbors is terrible. I have a neighbor down the street who should know better. I mean, she's a retired police officer, Robin Hunt, from the Brantford Police Department. And we had new neighbors move in next door, and she walked up to those new neighbors. This is recently. I've been home since 2015. My crime again was in 2008. She told those neighbors that I was incarcerated. I was not to be trusted. I am not a good person. And continually does that to any new neighbor that comes in. And I think to myself, wow, did I get a year sentence? No, I got a lifetime sentence. And the public needs to know that good people make bad choices. I made a bad choice, right? Bad choices. And I don't understand people wanting to make the darkest
continuing the punishment on continuing the punishment in the way that they see fit to handle.
Yeah. I don't understand that at all. And I think that's part of the reform is the education piece. Like you said, educating the public is so important. And I know a lot of these podcasts, and quite frankly, I give a lot of kudos to anybody who's been incarcerated, who gets out in public and is transparent and tells their story. And a lot of the podcasts are just about the story. And like I said to you prior to logging on, for me, the story is all the same. It doesn't matter to me if you took money from, not that it doesn't matter, but whoever your victim is, the bottom line is the system is the system. And we need, as a community, to change that system and to reform it to better fit the community, because prisons are supposed to keep our communities safe from harm.
From harm.
From harm. We are not harmful to our community.
No, I used to say, what are we going to do? Crochet you to death?
Yeah.
Or what are we going to do? Knit you to death? Or what are we going to do? Make a ceramic pot?
Yeah.
No, we're not a threat.
So we
It
were a
needs to
threat
be
to
dismantled and
ourselves.
changed.
Yeah.
And I think there's a tipping point because there's more of us, Jacqueline, that are getting out and speaking to talk about this, because common sense dictates that we can do a lot better
Yes.
as a community, to make the lower level nonviolent, take all of that and change it.
Yeah.
And instead of hurting a person, a family, friends, neighbors, the community, help the individual so that doesn't get there.
Yeah, it is true. Because you must agree with me. It's not fun talking to the public about your darkest moments. It's not fun.
Well, see, in this too, you could have either come home and had hidden and just gone back and just disappeared, which a lot of women do because they're so traumatized and they just want it to go away. And I had to make that decision too. I'm like, no, this is not, no, this needs to be addressed. And there needs to be more help in this space because it just, we're doing more damage to people.
Yeah, we really are. I mean, transitionally, the transition from home to prison to halfway, from halfway to home confinement, then just thrown back into the community with no help is isolating in itself. And I isolated myself for a year. I didn't leave my home. I was embarrassed. I felt shame and guilt, and I didn't want my family traumatized anymore by me telling my story. And I don't know, one day I woke up and I thought, the community just doesn't know. When I have people yelling at me to go back to prison, and they just don't, it's not that I don't believe people are bad people. I believe they're uneducated about a specific subject.
Yes.
And I think that the communities are not educated enough from actual inmates about the subject of criminal justice. I'm taking, like I said, I'm back in school for criminal justice, and some of the classes I take, I sit there and I'm like, wow, this isn't what it's really like. They're teaching what it's not reality.
What it's not like, right? What it's not like. And you're just like, I've enrolled in law school, so I'll be starting in the fall, but it's almost the same concept being where I'm at currently. But it's the same thing. You're going, but that's not the experience.
Yeah.
That's not really.
Yeah. And it's hard. I mean,
it's not education.
Yeah. And I mean, to educate people on experiences is so much harder than educating them on facts similar to our history of our country or history of each state. Prison is an experience. It's very difficult to educate somebody on a feeling or an experience, and every woman feels it differently, or man feels prison differently.
They do.
So I think the only way for me was just get out there and just tell my story and try the best that I know how to educate people.
You're doing that very well because, like I said, I've had a lot of people reach out to me who have seen your podcast. And again, they're not just one-sided where this is, my story. You're giving solutions and you're coming up with a good conversation that we all really need to have and be involved in.
Yeah. Well, how do people get in touch with you? Because I know that.
So you can reach me at, it would be Holli, HOLLI .Coleman, COULMAN at wallstreetprisonconsultants.com or holly.coleman at pinkladyprisonconsultants.com. And of course, you can reach me through Facebook. I'm all over Instagram. You can Google my name. All my information comes up.
We will put all of the information on the podcast.
You'll get everything.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty accessible.
Myself as well. And we will both put all of our information under this podcast. And I ask, please, any university, any college professor, anybody who has any questions about the realities of what it does for your mental health of being inside prison. And if you need help, and we would love to help change things, please reach out to us. And we have a slew of resources and other people who we would love to put boards together for you. So please do that. And Holli, I love having you here. It's so wonderful to have another woman.
This is good.
It's wonderful.
We still have more to talk about.
I know we have so much more to talk about. You have to come back again and again.
Love that. I would love that.
Because you're just as passionate as I am about this subject. And so I think the two of us together, we have a lot to offer. And I think we can come up with a lot of great changes that the system really needs.
I do too.
So,
well, thanks for having me.
Thank you. And bye to everybody. Again, we're going to start coming out weekly. At first, I started once a month. And I've been getting such a great feedback. People keep telling me you need to come out every Monday. So we will be coming out every Monday by 6 p.m. Eastern time. It will be live, and we will be sending links out to everybody. So please reach out to us, and we will see you next Monday. Bye.
Bye.